Time Review. I'm your host, Jesse Nussman, and with me, as always, fellow Atlanta film critic Jason Evans. Jason, welcome back from the July 4th holiday. We are diving into some movies we missed, some new movies that are coming in this weekend. The summer pipeline continues to just, flow with plentiful cinematic delights for everyone out there. And first, we're going to talk about, I think, one of the more curious titles of the year, which is a movie you've kind of been hyping up a little bit. I feel like has just been the subject of online hype for months and months, which is the horror movie Longlegs, starring Maika Monroe and Nicolas Cage. It's hard to watch this movie and not think of things like Silence of the Lambs or Seven. It is Maika Monroe playing a female FBI agent in the 90s, trying to track down this satanic serial killer who goes by the name of Longlegs, who's played by Nicolas Cage under a lot of prosthetics, is all I will say.
Wait, hold on. Let me jump in and say this.
Yeah.
Huge props. I'm gonna give it up to the Neon marketing guys, because they've been doing this thing where they've been hiding Nicolas Cage's face and makeup and turned that into some like viral marketing campaign. I honestly, like, when you first see him, like, he looks sort of like a cross between Tiny Tim, the musical performer Tiny Tim, and Pennywise,
yes,
the clown from It.
I thought about Tiny Tim a lot while watching him in this movie.
Yeah. Tiny Tim, not, a weird looking guy, but not the scariest looking guy.
No.
Yeah. I mean, look, Longlegs is a weird character, but am I wrong in saying he's almost more funny than he is scary? Like, he talks with a really strange voice. At one point in the movie, a young teenage girl just outright mocks him to his face. She goes, "Oh, the creepy guy is back." Like,
yeah, this is a real, like, I think both Cage and Maika Monroe in this movie are going to be performances that, like, if you're on the wavelength of the movie and you might think they're great, or they might come across as like two people really, really overacting. I first want to preface us, like, we're talking about the hype for this, and I don't want this to too much be kind of a movie about like what our expectations were because of the marketing versus what we're getting. But is this the scariest movie of the year? Because it's sort of been built up, I think, for a lot of people. And is it just sort of clever marketing on the part of Neon? Or, in your opinion, is this kind of like a, seismic big horror movie event for people to check out?
No, I don't think it is. I frankly, look, I'm a guy who, I get affected by scary movies, by horror movies. I've told the audience this. I don't usually go to see horror movies because it keeps me up at night. This one did not do that to me, and I don't want to seem like I'm trashing it too much. The film is incredibly foreboding. Everything about it is ominous and nerve-wracking. From the opening frame until the very end, you are at this level of like super ominous music and everything that's happening on screen. Like, Maika Monroe, sometimes she's talking on like this side of the screen, and like there's a window on the other side of the screen or a doorway. My eyes were on the window and the doorway because I'm like, someone's gonna come through. Oh my God, it's so tense.
Yeah.
But is that genuinely scary? Because I don't think that is.
I think this movie is
really quick. There are a couple small jump kind of scare kind of things that, it's unexpected. But I mean, especially when you consider that like the final half hour of this is pretty ridiculous. I don't know that I was that scared by it.
Yeah, I sort of find this movie effective for. I first want to preface, I don't know that I could say I, quote, like the experience of watching this, because this is in that sort of category of, we talked about some Maxine last week, which is a very like referential horror movie that kind of has a bit of a sense of humor about itself. This is like pure dread. Like, as an audience, you are meant to feel bad and feel sort of on edge at every moment. And for most of its running time, I think Oscar Perkins, who should be mentioned, I think it is a fun note to mention that the director of this serial killer movie is the son of Anthony Perkins, who played Norman Bates in Psycho. But I for a while in this movie, I think he's using kind of the frame and a sort of stillness in the cinematography to kind of make you on edge and sort of make you think like, so we're either going to cut away at any moment to something that's really upsetting, or just him holding on someone's face as as Maika Monroe reacts to something. And I think,
Tension. There's
yeah,
so much tension. It's
yeah.
unbelievable.
But
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think as the movie sort of goes on, and for, not to get too much into spoilers, like the puzzle pieces start being put together a little bit more, and sort of a clearer picture about what's going on starts revealing itself. The movie to me, I think, loses. It's scarier to me when it's being more ambiguous than when it starts sort of like literalizing and explaining kind of how these crimes are all connected and what other nefarious forces are maybe behind these killings. I think the movie sort of loses some of that really unsettling power as it goes on.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I thought the script left a lot to be desired. I already mentioned that the final act was a little bit ridiculous, but the entire first part, the movie sort of divided into different chapters. The entire first chapter, the entire first part of the movie focuses on these coded letters that are being written by Longlegs. It never ends up meaning anything. The Maika Monroe's character named Lee Harker basically cracks the code. I'm not sure we ever completely understand how she cracked it. She translates these letters. I don't, maybe I missed it. I don't think that changed anything. I don't think that meant anything to where they went, from a story standpoint. So, I mean, like, it's a film where the atmosphere and the tension is great, but the execution of the story itself is really lacking.
Which almost makes me like wish that, Perkins has such a great grasp over the atmosphere and just sort of would have relied on that and let sort of our imaginations and fears as an audience sort of fill in those dots. Because, another movie that people will probably compare this to that I think fits to what you're talking about, in something like Seven, there's a way in which the sort of precision of that movie and its storytelling, you feel like you are like figuring the story out like right at the same clip as the Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman characters.
Yeah.
Unlike something like Silence of the Lambs, which is an easy comparison, this has none of the kind of empathy and humanity that Jonathan Demme brings to that movie that I think makes it rewatchable and sort of fun to watch.
Well,
And weirdly, like I wanted to ask you, have you seen this Japanese movie from the 90s called Cure?
I've not. No.
So I would actually recommend our audience, if you're interested in this movie, go watch that one too, because I will say that movie has a very similar idea in terms of how these killings are taking place, and the idea of maybe there's some sort of hypnosis at play in terms of these killings. But that movie, I think, leans into its sort of ambiguity and makes for a much more like unsettling experience that just sort of builds and builds as you're sort of trying to unravel this mystery. But somehow the deeper you look, the more questions you have, and the sort of like more sort of confusion about like, oh, is there actually a serial killer in all of us, that kind of come to the forefront. Whereas when this movie sort of reveals what's going on, I was kind of like, oh, okay, well, I've sort of seen this in other movies, and
Yeah,
so
and it's
this
not that
sort of just
interesting.
felt derivative of like a bunch of other things I'd seen.
Yeah, and the other thing that I would add about all of this is I think that real horror, real terror comes from relatable characters. It comes from us watching it and us feeling like I could maybe be, in this situation, or I understand what the person in this situation is thinking. And one of the problems I have with this movie is that Mika Monroe's character, again named Lee Harker, um, is so serious and strange herself that I didn't connect with her. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
I found I didn't connect with anyone on screen in this movie. And like one of the things that made Silence of the Lambs so great was that Jodie Foster, Clarice's character, was a person we could relate to and root for.
Definitely.
I didn't even I didn't even come close to getting that from Lee Harker or anyone else in this movie. And so it became easier for me to remove myself from what was happening on screen. And so I wasn't afraid, because I'm not afraid for those characters because I don't feel very much for them.